Go to the hub. It's
You got it. Yeah, I am trying to sync my email, but it is.
don't worry about it. I would just go ahead and share what we have. Let's just go with it.
Go to the
Since
hub. It's
Sounds good. You got it.
put it in presenter mode and we are ready to go.
All right, let's do it.
You got it. And you want us to hit.
Good morning, everybody. Still morning? Yes, it is still morning. Good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. We are just going to give it a couple of seconds for everyone to hop on. We are expecting a pretty large group today. We do have a max Zoom capacity of 5,000 attendees, but we are live streaming this. So if you have any colleagues who aren't able to enter, they should be prompted to join the live stream as well. So let me just make sure my settings are set and then we'll get started. All right, I see we're already at 5,000 here, so I'm going to go ahead and get started by introducing myself. My name is Caitlin, and I am the lead partner success specialist here at Teaching Strategies, specifically for New York City. So my main focus is to support all of you wonderful New York City educators out there as you begin this implementation with creative curriculum. I am actually semi-local to you. I'm your neighbor just over the river in New Jersey. So I'm hopeful that I'll get to meet some of you in person at some point soon. But I'm just going to go over a couple of things before I hand it over to Ryan and Donna, who are your presenters for today. I'm sure a lot of you came into these sessions today with a lot of questions. I just want to go over some of our most frequently asked questions, just so that you can really focus on the content that's being delivered today, rather than worrying about some of these other things. So the first is logins. We know many of you have received logins and are already in the system exploring, and that is so exciting. And we also know some of you may not have received your logins yet. We are working on it. Our rostering team is really hard at work. We get files from the DOE and the DECE every couple of days, and they roster those. So please, we really appreciate your patience as we work through those. We are working on them. And then the second question is about your print kits. Our goal is that all of your print kits will be delivered by June 30th. Now, this was before there were some shipping delays because of the air quality situation in the tri-state area. We're hoping that that doesn't have a big impact, but please know our goal is that all the print kits will be delivered by June 30th. So those were just some frequently asked questions we wanted to address. And now I'm just going to go over some webinar housekeeping things. If we hop to the next slide. So this webinar is being recorded. I am going to make sure that it is posted to the New York City support website to access as an on-demand recording at any time. If you want to watch it back, or if any of your colleagues weren't able to attend today for one reason or another, you should also receive a link to the recording in a follow-up email that you'll get 24 hours after this session. This is also a listen only or a read only webinar if you have the closed captions enabled. We do also have our ASL interpreters that are above and below me interpreting. So your cameras and your microphones are off. The chat is also disabled, just as you can imagine. With a large group of over 5,000, the chat would be really difficult to manage. Same with the Q&A. We can have some time where I will turn the Q&A on at the end of our session, but it is disabled for the beginning of our session. So once we get to that Q&A section, I will turn it back on. And I think that's everything for this slide. One more, and then I'll pass it on. So we are an IASET accredited provider of professional development, and that means that there's a couple criteria we have to meet in order to be able to provide certificates. And unfortunately, in this setting, we're unable to meet those two requirements. So we're not able to present certificates, but if you need an proof of attendance, you will get an email from Zoom afterwards If you are watching on the YouTube live stream, I know a lot of you are worried about attendance. We are able to pull registration data. So as long as you've registered for this session, we have your data and we can share that if needed with the DOE and the DECE. All right, I think that's everything housekeeping wise. I am going to pass it on to our two presenters today, Ryan and Donna.
Thank you so much. I'll go ahead and get started, Ryan, and then kind of turn it over to you. Ryan and I are so happy to have you here today. I am the Director of Education and Implementation here at Teaching Strategies. I have been very closely tied to this project, working at the DOE level. I am super excited by what is to come for all teachers here. I had the opportunity to be in New York City yesterday in some classrooms that were already using the creative curriculum, and they were just doing such amazing work, the teachers and the children. So I look for that to continue. Ryan and I are here today to really talk about GOLD and the assessment process. Some of you may be familiar with GOLD. Some of you may not have used GOLD, but I know all of you at some point in time have used some sort of system in order to gather observations on children's skills, abilities, and understanding to determine where they are and how that you would support them as teachers in their growth. And so if we think about as we go through this, Ryan will start to really cover that there are a lot of things that are very similar to what you have already been doing. The difference will come down to is that the objectives for development and learning may be worded a little bit different than what you have looked at in the past. I will tell you that GOLD is aligned with the New York State Early Learning Standards. So as you are implementing the curriculum in GOLD, you can be assured that you're meeting those particular standards. And then the system that you will be putting your observations into will be new. But again, the skills you've always used as a teacher, they're still the same, and we will continue to do that. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Ryan, here to introduce himself, and then he will go ahead and start the session, and I'll kind of pop in here or there. Ryan?
Thanks, Donna. So I'm Ryan Woods. I'm one of the education consultants at Teaching Strategies, and my goal today is to really help you all be successful in your understanding of GOLD. Some background. Gosh, I used GOLD as a teacher. I used GOLD as a coach, as an administrator, and as a trainer. And it was one of the early childhood programs that I absolutely fell in love with long ago and far away. And that's really one of the things that drew me to Teaching Strategies. And I got to meet Donna in 2016, and it brought me here, right? And the reason being is because it dramatically impacted the outcomes of the students that I taught every single day. Right. So I had an incredibly strong belief in GOLD and what it did and how it could impact students. And that's what we're here to talk to you about today. I'm going to skip ahead just a couple slides to get past our housekeeping slides, just to give you all some information about the New York City DOE information regarding teaching strategies. And if you have any questions, right? I know Caitlin covered some of this especially regarding the login information and your credits and certificates. But the New York City Teaching Strategies landing page is going to be listed up on the top. And if you are having struggles with your login and do not receive your digital resources by June 30th, you guys can reach out to nycsuccess@teachingstrategies.com. All right. So when we go to our teachingstrategies.com/New York City website, there's going to be lovely videos that are really going to give you all some great background knowledge on the Teaching Strategies family of products that you're going to be incorporating in your classrooms, right? And the wonderful Natalie Pickett is going to really guide you through that process and giving you that information and giving you that understanding that you all might need as you start to implement this process, in your classroom across the city. And one of the things that we really want our customers to understand, and teachers all over the globe, is that we really want to provide you with our 3 promises, right? We want and will respect every child. We've got your back. We want to make sure that you know that support exists for you at all levels of your implementation. And then through our connected ecosystem, we really bring it all together to not only support you, but the children in your programs, which is the ultimate goal of every child, or excuse me, every early childhood provider across the country.
Yeah, we finally like to say, Ryan, I think that, we say, our goal is to really give teachers their Sunday nights back, right? And so how can we really connect all the resources that you use on a daily basis in order for technology to work for you versus you working for technology?
Absolutely. And I will tell you the strides Teaching Strategies has made in the world of early childhood education in order to support those teachers has been amazing. I remember when I first started in this world and lesson planning took me 2 or 3 hours. Entering my documentation into the system or not even the system, entering it into a piece of paper and putting it in my pizza box was quite the challenge too. But really giving us the opportunity to support our children, but also give us that time back is huge.
Exactly. We've come so far, Ryan. When I think back to, my time as a teacher, I remember having all the children's files and all of my state's early learning standards spread out all over my living room floor back before digital even existed, to where I was trying to figure out where children's skills and abilities were, right? And so you're right. We have come a long way. And we have a lot of resources that can help us be more efficient in the work that we do. We've always had the practices, but now it's bringing efficiency to those practices. So let's get started.
Got it. So today we're gonna go through our PowerPoint presentation and look at our platform as well. But we really want to focus in on these learning objectives, right? So we really want to talk about formative and summative assessment and what they mean to teachers, ways in which they can really impact and inform your classroom practices. We want to be able to compare and contrast those assessments and really work with you all to understand which situation in your classroom might make that better. And then specifically speak to tools and resources when we are really considering focusing on communicating with families, which is going to be huge, right? Creating those family partnerships gives us an opportunity to really engage folks outside of the classroom and allow them to continue to impact the lives of their children outside of the classroom environment.
Right. The deputy chancellor has this saying that I've absolutely fallen in love with, right? Is that families are their children's first and forever teacher. And so it's really important that we have them connected to the work that we do in classrooms.
Absolutely. So when we start to think about the purposes of GOLD, and I just have to move something around on my screen, for some reason it keeps jumping back and forth, and I apologize, friends. But we really want to talk about the importance of observing and documenting children's development and learning over time, really painting that clear progression or clear understanding of what a student's knowledge, skills, and abilities are, right? Rather than sitting them down at a table to try to identify what they know, we create opportunities for this learning to occur over time that really allow us to establish a great baseline and then continue to build upon these students' knowledge, skills, and ability over a course of a year. We utilize GOLD to support, guide, and inform planning instruction in our classroom. And what that means is that we're allowed to, or not allowed, pardon me, we have the opportunity to take all of the data that we gather from GOLD and utilize that to best serve the needs of the students we're supporting in our classroom. But we also have the opportunity to track data and evaluate students' progression over time that give us the opportunity to understand who might need special help, screening, and further evaluation, those students that might need some additional support in specific areas. We can generate reports and also communicate with those family members. So we have our class profile report, and we have our development and learning report, and we have our, excuse me, I apologize. I'm drawing a blank for a moment there. We have our family conference form, right? Which really allow us to not only understand where children are in the moment, but also communicate out with those families so we can create a plan together to best serve their children long-term. When we start thinking about generating outcome information as part of that larger accountability system, that really gives us the opportunity as an organization as a whole to really understand where our student populations are, to find out the areas that we might have gaps or challenges. I tell folks all the time when I'm speaking to customers that I understand what that means, because when I was a teacher, I had an incredible challenge teaching math. It was very, very difficult for me. So really understanding where my students were and what my gaps were as a teacher really gave me the opportunity to increase my own professional development so I could better serve my students. And then again, giving us that opportunity to report back to administrators so they can create opportunities for program planning and professional development, really allowing us to steer that professional development within our own program to best meet the needs of everyone that we serve, whether it's teachers, whether it's students, and whether it's families. As we start to really dive into what gold is going to be found within our 38 research-based objectives. So research has shown that students need these skills in order to be successful in education and in life. So really being able to focus in on the whole child, whether we're looking at social, emotional, physical, language, cognitive development, literacy, math, science, social studies, technology, and the arts, really gives us the opportunity to meet the child in every aspect of their life, right? So we see so much focus in this world on literacy and language and math skills. And oftentimes folks forget about the other areas. When we think about students who have challenges regulating their own behaviors and can't button their pants or zip their coats and get frustrated and disrupt group learning experiences, how does that affect language literacy and math in your classroom environment? So focusing in on the whole child gives us that opportunity to support them in every aspect of their development and education and provide them with the opportunities to grow into successful adults so they can manage all situations of their life. Donna, you look like you wanted to say something.
No, I was just going to follow up just by saying that for this particular upcoming year and so forth, that we will not be using the areas of science and technology, social studies, and the arts. We will be using the first 23 objectives as we begin measuring children's skills and abilities.
All right.
So, but knowing that does not mean that teachers will not see these skills emerge, right? And so it does not mean that they cannot celebrate the growth that happens in those areas with family members and with administrators and really support children's development in those areas.
Absolutely. So when we start to look at our progressions for development and learning, you'll see a grouping of colored bands. So what this is really showing us is that based upon research, the widely held expectation for a particular age or grade is going to fall within a particular colored band, right? So we can see that the typically performing student of a specific age or grade would fall within red, orange, yellow, blue, purple, brown, pink, or gray. Right. And what this really shows us is that if you look at a sampling of students that fall within that widely held expectation nationally, this is where they typically would fall. But in reality, our goal as educators is to really understand who our students are, where they fall developmentally and academically, and help them grow. Right. So when we look at this particular slide, we can see that the typically performing student in the pre-K age, right, so that year right before kindergarten, would fall within our blue colored band. Right? So we know that that's the point where we at minimum want to get our students to as far as their progress in growing and developing. Right? We may have a student that falls within our yellow colored band or our green colored band. And what that does is it provides us an opportunity to create differentiated instruction in our classroom that allow us to continue to support that student's growth and development, to really understand where they are in the moment, and again, help them continue to develop and grow. Donna, did you have anything you wanted to add to this one?
No, I think that was beautifully said.
All right. So the next thing we dive into really is starting to look at our progressions, really understanding what they are and how they support our students. So each of our 23, right, Donna?
Yes.
Our 23 objectives that we're going to be looking at and their associated dimensions for New York City really give us the opportunity to dive deeply into students' knowledge, skills, and abilities. So really understanding at a specific age or grade where the typically performing student would fall, but at the same time being able to support all children within our care. So we can see that a student that's in the blue colored band or the pre-K age would typically for this objective fall at a level 6, uses refined wrist and finger movements, right? Down below, we give you some examples. But what this gives us the opportunity to understand as educators is what our progression looks like. What are all of the things that we need to be looking for within our classroom environment in order to help our students develop and grow? So when we look at our objective, this particular one is demonstrates fine motor strength and coordination. This is going to be that overarching area that we're going to look at when we're trying to find something specific in our classroom that we're going to observe and record those children's behaviors. As we continue to drill down into that dimension, we're going to look specifically for skills related to using fingers and hands. As we look at those levels, those are going to be related to really capturing raw data scores. So really giving us that opportunity over our entire organization to really understand where our students are falling as a whole, and creating scores for that. As we dive into those indicators, these are going to be the things that we're specifically looking for within our classroom as we're observing those students. We're looking for a student potentially that's using small, precise finger and hand movements. What does that truly mean? So we give teachers examples of ways in which that they might be able to see this occur within their classroom environment. So they might be able to use correct scissor grips. They might attempt to tie their shoes. They might push specific keys on a keyboard or arrange small pegs. So these are examples of how this skill might occur and ways to support the teacher in really understanding what that means in the classroom. It's certainly not the only ways in which you could see these indicators being exhibited in the classroom, but certainly a way in which we can support teachers in a classroom in understanding what this might look like so they can capture that observation on those students. We have those widely held expectations that we talked about before. So the colored bands are going to represent a specific age or grade and an area of development, and understanding where your students might fall. And then the next thing we really jump into is the assessment cycle, right? How formative and summative assessments can impact outcomes in our classroom, how we can take that opportunity to foster the development of specific areas within our classroom by utilizing things from our curriculum. So we might be able to use those additional resources that come within the curriculum, whether it be the intentional teaching cards, the book discussion cards, the Mighty Minutes, and really give us that opportunity to really impact those outcomes and support that summative assessment process that we're going to be utilizing throughout the year. So I want you to take a minute and consider how formative and summative assessments are going to impact outcomes in your classrooms. In what ways can you all utilize them as drivers to support your students' growth and development? For me as a classroom teacher, it gave me the opportunity to, have small group exercises where I could focus in on the needs of specific students. It gave me the opportunity to, in my large group meetings in the morning, really understand, based upon the data that I've collected, where my students are so I could meet their specific needs. It went into the read alouds as well, utilizing the books and the book discussion cards that come as a part of the curriculum in order to really drive those outcomes. It gave me an opportunity to engage with my students where they were so I could best impact them versus hoping for the best, which is what I had to do when I first started in early childhood education. I had to pull resources from various sources and really hope for the best. Mm-hmm. And when the curriculum came about in its current form, it gave me the opportunity to better serve my children and create opportunities for them to be most successful in education and in life.
So Ryan, you can go to the next slide here a little bit. I want to just kind of piggyback off of what Ryan is saying is that the assessment process is a systematic approach to taking documentation, and it's really about following this systematic approach that's going to help us give us the best information that we can have on children's skills, abilities, and understandings in order to drive our planning, right? One of the things that you also will be doing in New York City is you will be using the ASQ screening tool, right? And a screening tool is a type of assessment also, right? But when you think about it, the type of assessment that is it's done at one point in time, right? Sometimes family members participate in that. So within the first 45 days of school, you will be completing your ASQ screener, right? So it's a screening tool that we use. It helps us gather valuable information on where children's skills and abilities are. However, it can be subjective, right? So because it's done at one point in time, we can sometimes, a child who does not have the temperament that they would give a stranger information may not do as well on the ASQ as a child who has the temperament of being, readily eager to meet new individuals, right? A child could be coming down with an ear infection that day. A child could just be really upset that they didn't get the Pop-Tart this morning that they wanted. There are reasons why children do really well or not well on our screening tool. However, we need to connect our screening tool to the formative and summative assessment process, right? And so we take the information that we have collected on the ASQ, and your coaches and leaders will be giving you guidance on how to actually put your screening tool into Gold as one piece of documentation that allows you then to start planning for the formative assessment process. Because from the screening tool, what you're going to do is you're going to develop questions, right? So when we think about observation in general, it's all about asking questions. It's where is the child's skills and abilities in this particular area of development or learning? If I notice the screening tool gives me information that the child may be at risk of being below where we would expect them to be, then I would then develop a observation action plan within my formative assessment using Gold to be able to clarify that, to continue to gather information. So just like when Ryan was talking about earlier about the purposes of Gold, and one of those purposes of Gold was to identify children who may benefit from additional support. That's exactly what happens here. That ASQ gives us some information. We put it into the formative assessment system. We develop questions based off of what we saw from the ASQ that allows us to then document more, then may lead us to, yes, this child could actually benefit from some external support in the classroom. So there's actually 4 different types of assessment. The 3 types that you will use most often is every year you will use your screening tool, your ASQ, that will then feed into your formative assessment, which Ryan is getting ready to talk about, that then flows into that summative assessment that gives us great data at one point in time. And Ryan's going to continue to talk about this. But I think what is most important to remember here is that it is a systematic approach that we're following on a daily, weekly, monthly basis that is really going to drive information that is going to support you in the work that you do with your children. Ryan?
Yeah, and it's absolutely true. Again, I go back to my days as a classroom teacher, and I utilized ASQ as well. And ASQ is wonderful for what it is. It's a baseline developmental screener. I used that at the beginning of the year to gain a basic understanding of where my students fell. And that really gave me the opportunity to then utilize the curriculum and its components to really continue to support that development long term, to make sure that I was painting the clearest picture that I could possibly about my students. And when I thought about the formative assessment process and thought about how I could collect during interactions, collecting that information for the assessment purposes, right? I thought about, my days early as a teacher where I had my embroidered apple lakeshore apron with my index cards and my pens and how I utilized that to collect information and hoped I had what I needed to support my students. And what that really allowed me to do once I had the creative curriculum in my classroom was look at the daily resources that allowed me to craft these interactions in my classroom in order to collect this data, which ultimately allowed me to support my students. Right. So what I really thought about was when I have my sign-in sheet at the beginning of the day, when I had my morning meeting where we asked our questions of the day, when I had my transitional activities and I used Mighty Minutes, and when I found intentional teaching cards and saw those questions to guide my observations, I thought, wow, this is a way that I can really intentionally gather information about my students to help me help them. And knowing that I could do it every day led me down this path where I really utilized those resources to inform my planning and instruction in my classroom. But one of the things that I really had to do so much is plan with intentionality. So what I did was I would look at my curriculum and its components. I would look at my assessment process and my observations that I've collected and really try to determine what I needed to do as a teacher to support those children. Right? Because we see in the formative assessment process, our goal is to monitor development and learning. But how do you do that? And you do that by utilizing your curricular components, continually looking at your gold data and generating those reports to best meet the needs of those students. But at the same time, meshing all of those components together to really improve those outcomes. And what I found is that when I intentionally planned as a teacher, utilizing the curricular components and utilizing my gold data, it painted an incredibly clear picture of what my students' knowledge, skills, and abilities were. So I had the opportunity as an educator to differentiate, to create the biggest impact possible. And when we jump over to our summative assessment, right, we talk about how it uses that information gathered over a period of time, right? We can see that it can be the same observations used from that formative assessment process. So what we've done with Gold is really created the opportunity where you can take your formative assessment pieces, those observations you're generating, and utilize that as a part of the formal assessment process, right? By tying the two together, you're not reliant upon your memory. You're not reliant upon your note cards. You're going to look at the My Teaching Strategies platform in our Assess tab and really understand, based upon things that you've entered in over the last 2.5 to 3 months, to best serve your students. And when I think about that, I think about my last year as a pre-K teacher. I had 24 students in my classroom. And how could I remember everything that those 24 students did over a 2.5 to 3 month period of time? There was no way that my memory would allow for that. So really being able to intentionally capture that information within the My Teaching Strategies platform and use that to really drive my assessment process allowed me to be much more accurate, which allowed for much more intentionality when it came to serving those students. When we think about utilizing this formal process or the summative assessment a few times a year, this gave me the opportunity to really paint very clear pictures of who my students were, what their knowledge, skills, and abilities were, and how I could create opportunities to guide them and help them develop and grow throughout the course of a year. With that being said, I was able to see student outcomes that were impacted dramatically when they went to kindergarten. I had the opportunity to speak with teachers that said, we've noticed a change in the population of students coming from your program when they're entering kindergarten in the last few years. And the only thing that I could really tie that back to as an educator was gold, because it painted that clear picture. I didn't have to pull out my copy of Mailbox 97 and pull out that penguin cutout and hope for the best, right? I really had the opportunity to use research-based information and resources that allowed me to work with these students. But it also went back to really sharing out information with families and administrators. Because what happened before, I could talk to them about things that I said, I would pull out my note cards, but when I had concrete information that really showcased where a student fell, whether it was an opportunity for growth or whether it was an area that they were excelling, it gave me the opportunity to be very clear when I was speaking to both families and administrators about my students and about my classroom, so I could really paint a clear picture of where we were. So for families, it gave us an opportunity to work together to best serve their students. For my administrators, it gave me an opportunity for them to understand things I might need in my classroom or ways in which I might need to steer my own professional development in order to better not only myself, but us as a program. Because our goal is to really evaluate that development learning over time, what we're really trying to do is again, best understand where our students are, what we've done to support them, and what that outcome looks like from a developmental perspective. And that's how gold worked for me as an educator and impacted my students. And I saw incredible value in it. Donna, do you have anything you want to add to this one?
No, I think it's beautifully said. And it's almost like you were telling my story too, Ryan, right? I went through the same things, same experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. And for teachers, it's going to be very much the same. I mean, we have goals that certainly drive us as educators, and that's what we need for our students. And that's what I found. And it made me feel impactful as an educator. It made me feel like I was doing everything I could to serve my students. The next slide that we're really going to go to is really starting to understand what the assessment process looks like and how it's going to impact our classroom environment. So when we look at step one of the assessment process, we're really going to be asking ourselves this question: what does this child know? What is he or she able to do? As we move into step two, it's going to be, what does this child know? I wonder why that duplicated. I apologize, friends.
Yeah. Can I say something here too? It's so as we begin actually taking observations, so when we think about step one is actually about taking those observations, right? And it's not about did the child accomplish something, it's how did the child accomplish something, right? So it's not did the child write their name, it's how did the child write their name? How were they holding the writing tool, right? What did the letter formation look like on the paper as they were writing their name? So really getting deep into the learning. Again, it's not about a child holding up a finished product or project that they've completed. It's about gathering that information about how did they get to that, right? What was the process they went through? So we're really capturing the process of the learning that is taking place. Again, Ryan, as we move into step two is really about, I've taken the observations, right? And now I'm going to determine where along the progression is the child's skills and abilities. Are they falling within their widely held expectations? Are they below or are they above, right? And then how do I use that information to further support or scaffold the child's learning? Do you want me to finish it?
If you want to, you go right ahead. You seem like a great role there.
Okay, perfect. Right. So that moves into, so when we really think about the assessment process here, you're gathering observations on a daily basis. That doesn't mean we gather observations on every single child every day, But because you're going to set yourself a goal of, I might set myself a goal of, I'm going to take 3 pieces of documentation today. But as I go into the day, I'm going to say, today I want to gather documentation on objective 10A. These are the 3 children I would like to gather documentation on, right? And so I have Caitlin, I have Ryan, and I have Amy that I'm gathering documentation on. Then I'm thinking through, well, when would I gather documentation? Well, on Amy, she's not necessarily a morning person. So maybe capturing documentation on her when she first comes in the morning might not give me the best data that I'm looking for. But as we start to move into the day and she's engaging with other children in dramatic play, she seems to come, alive, and the conversations flow out of her. So I know that I'm really going to get accurate information at that time. Teachers know their students and children better than anybody. They know their temperaments. They know when is the best time to take documentation, right? For Caitlin, maybe she's a dual language learner, and I noticed that she tends to have back and forth conversations with, let's say, another Spanish-speaking student in the classroom. I don't necessarily, for Objective 10A, have to understand exactly what was said, but I can know how many exchanges they had, right? And so it helps me measure that information. But for Ryan, I know that once he's outdoor, he seeks out his best friend, he has deep conversations there. But I also have to think about how I'm taking that documentation. So with Caitlin, maybe it's, I'm just counting on my fingers how many exchanges they have, and I'm documenting the number of exchanges. With Ryan, I may write, because I know that Ryan, I have some questions about his, the words that he's using in his sentences. Maybe I write down that Ryan said this and Sam said this, Ryan said this and Sam said this. So it's going to be a combination. When I take that documentation at the end of the day, I kind of move into step 2. And that step 2 is, so now that I took this beautiful piece of documentation on a child or children in the classroom, what do I do with it? I'm going to determine where along the progression, as Ryan was showing you, each child's skills were. But what else did I see? If I was observing, engaging in conversation, I probably also saw 10B uses social rules of language, or 9B speaks clearly, or 9C uses conventional grammar, which is just basically how many words did a child use in a sentence. So I start to also connect other objectives and dimensions that I might see. Try to stick to about 3 or 4 other objectives for developmental learning. If you're having to try to stretch it, to connect it, leave it off, right? There'll be plenty of other opportunities to observe children. Then I take that information, right? And what I do with that information is then I've been collecting information on children all week long. And then I'm going to make decisions with it, which really is getting into that step 4, where I'm saying, so looking at my whole class now, where were the skills and abilities of children? Do I have a group of students whose skills and abilities are below the widely held expectations? Well, then I'm going to start problem solving. Well, why are their skills and abilities below? What are the things that I could do as a teacher? What are additional intentional teaching cards, or maybe a material that I'm going to add to my environment, right? That's going to support children's growth. But maybe I have one child whose skills and abilities are way above the widely held expectations. What am I going to do for that child, right? How am I going to support that student in their growth, even if they are a 4-year-old who has skills and abilities at the end of kindergarten, first grade? I still need to be supporting them in those particular areas. Where have I taken documentation and where have I not taken documentation, right? As teachers, we tend to take documentation in areas that we're most comfortable with. I'm the complete opposite of Ryan, right? Math comes easy for me. When I walk into a classroom, math is the first thing I see everywhere. I tend to take more documentation in math because I see it everywhere, to where there are other areas of development and learning that I do have to, like cognitive, right? It's not that I can't document in cognitive. I just have to think more about it, right? I have to have a more focused approach when I do this. So this is about also us really each week saying, what do I have on children? What questions have I not asked about children's skills and abilities? Which then takes us into that fourth step of the assessment process. You're just taking all the information of what were children's interests over the week, right? And so a clear example of that is following up on the 10A is I was observing children in 10A, but I noticed that when Amy and and Alyssa, they were in the dramatic play area, and I was capturing them engaging in conversation, but they were having this beautiful conversation about rice, right? And Alyssa says she's over there and she's stirring a pot, and Amy asks her, "What are you making?" She says, "I'm making rice." And Alyssa said, "That's not how you make rice. You make rice in our rice cooker, right?" And Amy says, "No, that's not how we make rice. We make rice on the stove." So even though I was capturing, I could see this beautiful conversation happening between these two students about how they made rice differently in their own homes, right? That's cultural. It's very cultural. So how could I build on that, right? They were having this great conversation. So that might be where I said I noticed this over the week. So I'm going to make sure that as I think about planning next week, maybe I'm going to add some different types of rices to my discovery area for children to really discover the differences in different types of rice, right? But maybe then we bring in different recipes for rice and we put those in our dramatic play area where they were having it, right? And so making sure that we're really building upon. I have a book that's called Rice is Nice in my curriculum. Maybe I add that to my dramatic play area to continue to build. So that's really that fourth stage. You take, what do you notice about children's skills and abilities? I noticed I had a group of students who their skills and abilities weren't quite where I would like them to be in measurement. I'm first going to evaluate my environment. Do children have opportunity? I'm going to add an intentional teaching experience for measurement into my lesson plan to encourage those students to practice those particular skills. So I'm looking at children's interest. I'm looking at their skills and abilities as I'm thinking about that planning process. So taking everything that you have learned about students over that particular week and then thinking about, so as we get into that planning process, teaching strategies has provided us with a structure, right, that we can download our weekly plans. This frees you up as a teacher then to make those individual decisions based off of the data that you have collected for children, right? And then make sure that what their interests are and so forth. And then we go into this the next week, right? So this is that systematic approach. We always are doing this. You have been doing this for years if you're a teacher. Sometimes we've done it in our head. Sometimes we've actually put it down, but you have probably always followed this systematic approach to assessing and really driving our planning with children. But now we have this system that's going to allow us to put it into an electronic system that is actually going to work for us.
And it does that well.
Mm-hmm.
Let me tell you, really having a pretty clearly defined path to differentiate instruction as a teacher was incredible for me. It gave me the opportunity where it removed some of those times where I felt lost. And I certainly did, because before this system really came about, I didn't really have an opportunity to have concrete examples and resources to utilize to help build and strengthen those skills and abilities of my students, right? And that's what this did. It gave me that opportunity to understand if they were making progress and really create opportunities to take what I knew and use it to plan.
So do you want to take them all to the online system real quick? And before we go ahead and get into, if we can spend about some time in there and show them the online system and how it all works.
So I'm going to go ahead and log in, and I will share my screen again. All right. So look at that. We can see on the landing page for everyone that we have a great pop-up that talks about our June 8th webinar series. So welcome to that, friends. I'm going to say remind me later. And when we log into the My Teaching Strategies platform, folks, this is really what we're going to see as educators within our program. There's going to be a landing page that has all of the information we need really at our fingertips. So when we go into this process and we really start thinking about gold, one of the places that we're really going to start is in our Assess tab. And this is going to be the area that we have the opportunity as educators to enter our observational data into the My Teaching Strategies platform to meet the needs of all children. So when we log into our platform and enter the Assess tab, the first page that we see is our at a glance page. And what Teaching Strategies has done is given teachers an opportunity in that at a glance to really understand what they've added to this tool in order to support the needs of children. So you can see, for example, for Bella Fernandez in the area of language development, that I have 7 pieces of documentation. Some of them need preliminary levels, and we'll go into that shortly. But what it also says, for example, under physical development for Jonathan, is that based upon what we've entered into this tool, Jonathan's skills and abilities are within the widely held expectation for this area, right? So if we click on the legend on the right-hand side of the screen, there's going to be information on what all of these icons mean, whether or not there's no documentation, whether there's documentation but preliminary levels are needed, whether the objective is required or not, whether 70% of the preliminary levels are set, or if there's at least one preliminary level for each objective for this particular area. So what that tells us is, again, in that at a glance moment, areas that we might need to support the children more or drive our own professional development because, we might have our own internal struggles, but it also paints a very clear picture of what you've entered. Now, for example, if I were to dive more deeply into the literacy area for Bella, for example, I can see as I scroll through these progressions, everything that I've been able to enter for this particular child, right? So for example, if I pull up objective 16A, where you can see that I have 1 piece of documentation, this is going to show us what that progression is, what my piece of documentation is. And if I click on that and expand it out even further, this shows me that documentation that I've entered on March 9th, 2023 for this particular group of students. But it also says to me, based upon this piece of documentation, if I were to assess the students' knowledge, skills, and abilities today, this is where they would fall. And what this does for educators is it ties it back to that summative assessment process. So again, there's not a lot of reliance upon your memory when you're going into that process. It paints that very clear picture so you don't have to guess. So I tell folks all the time, it takes the guesswork out because it genuinely does.
Right. I want to say here, though, Ryan, too, is that I want you to look at this piece of documentation. Bella, Shantae, Tiana searched and found the letters in their names in the sand. They named the letters, placed the letters in the right order, and wrote their names on the whiteboard. If you notice that this particular one was attached to objective 16A, which is recognizes and names letters, but look at the other objectives and dimensions that we were able to actually attach this particular piece of documentation to. We had 2A, which was interacts with peers. We had 7A, which is uses fingers and hands. We had 10A, which is engages in conversation. 16A identifies and names letters. 16B identifies letter sound correspondence. And then 19A writes names. So just by this one simple piece of documentation that we took, we were able to connect it to several areas of development and learning. And what Ryan is so correct in, what this is going to do for you as a teacher is it's going to start help you differentiate the instruction for your children when it comes to your weekly planning purposes. The other thing I think is to remember here too is that we do have some time-saving features that are built into Gold that will help you take documentation in a very efficient way. We have a Gold documentation app, right? They can be placed on either a phone or an iPad. It allows teachers to take photos and up to 1-minute voice recordings and videos, doing talk to text, right, for your observations. It allows you to connect what you've done in the app to the students in your classroom. It allows you to assign levels based off of their skills, abilities, and understanding, and then to upload that information very easily, okay? We also have something called a on-the-spot observation recording tool, which helps us gather information extremely quickly in the system based off of, it's like a checklist for physical, literacy, and math. I actually highly suggest we use this within the first couple of weeks of a checkpoint, because I don't have to have a deep relationship with children to know, can they demonstrate traveling skills, right? And so I'm setting up the opportunity. I'm outside, I'm gathering whether children can use balancing skills, and I'm quickly being able to document, putting a check mark where their skills and abilities are, and then later just putting that information into the system. You could take a picture of the on the spot. It's not required. You could, but we would mark it as an on the spot observation. We also have within the on the spot the opportunity for our alphabet concepts. And so when we click on this, this gives us immediate data as to where children's skills and abilities might be. So we could go to Bella Fernandez here and we could say she's able to recognize her uppercase B, her lowercase e, her lowercase L, L, and then her lowercase a. As we begin to put that information into the system and we save it, she also knows that the she's got that letter sound recognition for B, right? And I also know that Bella can write her name. She can write the uppercase B. She can write the lowercase. So this of her name, right? I know that she's got this. So then as I save this information into the system begins to, if you hit the back button next to Bella's name, then it begins to track a progress of where children's alphabet knowledge is. We also have the opportunity to do this for shapes and for number concepts. So these are time-saving features that will help you very quickly be able to gather information on children. I know that Ryan is probably going to take you in a moment here, because as you put documentation into the system, and Ryan, if you can show this one really cool feature here of how the system then works for you. And then you can, I think we can come back and kind of show the checkpoint thing. But Ryan's had documentation into the system. So now when he goes over to his teach, right? When he goes to what his lesson plan is. And so if you can just go ahead and go to the month and add a study. So Ryan's very quickly going to go ahead and add a study. So go ahead and add the ball study there. So now that we've added our ball study, if Ryan now goes into that, let's just say any day. So if he goes into the ball study, the system itself is going to have that structure. We were talking about that structure, but now let's talk about how assessment works for us, right? So if you can go to the small group, and click on the small group. So now as Ryan goes to the small group, and he pulls up that intentional teaching experience here, your students, your children's names will already be connected, and the system will then differentiate the instruction for you. So based off of all of this beautiful assessment data that you have put into the system now works for you as a teacher. Now it's going to tell you when you do this intentional teaching experience with your children, this is where you would focus the activity on. Now, the system also allows us to assess in the moment. So Ryan, if you go up, I'm doing this activity. I now have my progressions. Now I see my progression. I see all of my students. So if I'm in a small group activity, maybe I decided that for today, I'm going to measure 3 children's skills when it comes to this small group. I'm looking at them identifying and naming letters. I'm going to determine, let's just say for Bella, Jonathan, and Natasha, where their skills and abilities are. And Ryan, if you can kind of just click where their skills and abilities are, that would be great. So here I have information. I can then go to that next question. If you go down a little bit, there's my next question. For the 3 students in demonstrates knowledge of print and its uses, I'm again going to be able to determine for those 3 students where their skills and abilities were. And then for that last question, I could do the same for the 3 students. You've got your students way up there, but that's okay. All right, and then I'm going to save it. And now what the system does, if you save that, if we go back to the assess and we look at the documentation, we should, if we view our documentation, the system will start to generate. So we can, see that when we're, I think it was this second one that we did here on June 8th here, right? So we can see here that the child completed the knowing our friends, learning to recognize classmates' names. That was the intentional teaching experience here. We can see that Ryan, the system generated a piece of documentation for us. We have everything here. So the next time I go in and I do an intentional teaching experience around these same objectives, the system will reevaluate that and then make sure that it is placing the children's skills and abilities along that teaching sequence in the area at the level that I should be supporting their growth and development. You can see all of your documentation here. So Ryan has shown you how to add documentation. We've talked about some time-saving features. We can view our documentation, but sometimes as teachers, we get really busy. We add something, and maybe we forgot to do something in this system. So the system allows us to know whether or not there is an action required for any piece of documentation that we've put in. So if you look over underneath of the filter documentation section on the right-hand side, there is an action required button. And if we turn that button on, the system will pull out any piece of documentation that I didn't quite finish in order for the system to use that information to help us understand where children's skills and abilities are. So we can see here for Jonathan describes picture as he draws and sketches map to get to the store. We see up at the top where it says that we did not add levels, that we attached an objective, but we did not add levels. So we can simply click on that. And then that will take us to our progression, where then we can finish that piece of documentation and go ahead and assign a child's skills and abilities. So go ahead and just assign that level's fine, level 4 for right now. And then is it not allowing you to click in there? It might be because this is a training account. It doesn't allow us to click in there, but you would be able to go ahead and click in here and then save it. And it would then take it out of the action required area and into our completed observations at that particular time. And what we're looking for is exactly what Ryan is pointing to here, that we have the rainbow square that then actually has the check box, the little round blue circle with a check box in it. That tells us that we have completed every step in order for then the system to take that information and to work for us. So what are the ways we want it to work for us? Ryan talked about that there were reports that we could look at, right? And so now if we go to the report tab here, we can go to our class profile report and we can run this. And it's really a good idea to get into the in the habit of really running this class profile report really on a weekly basis, because it gives us such valuable information. So here, when we're looking at manages feelings, we can see that Jonathan and Tiana, their skills and abilities are below the widely held expectation for manages feelings. But Bella and Natasha, their skills fall within. These children were assigned to the blue color band because they will be going to kindergarten the next year, right? I can see when it comes to response to emotional cues that Natasha and Tiana are 2 levels below the widely held expectations. Jonathan is also below. So for the pieces of documentation I have in here for the children, the 3 children I have documentation on are below. So this is where I might say, oh, I probably want to add to my lesson plan to support these children. So Ryan, I'm going to ask you to go back to the teach area. We're going to go to our week or month. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add an activity to support those children. So we're going to add an activity. We're going to choose the day that we want to add it, hit next, and then I'm going to have you go to select using objectives for objectives and dimensions. We're going to go to social emotional. We're going to go to objective 2, which is establishes and sustains positive relationships. And we're going to go to I think it was 2B, response to emotional cues. The system is then going to generate all of the Mighty Minutes and intentional teaching experiences that I could add into my lesson plan that would help support these students in their growth. So if I wanted to add character feelings, I just simply click on it. It will pull it up. I can see how it is differentiating that instruction. We can see that Natasha, we could see that for those students that were below, right? Jonathan, Tiana, and Natasha, when we looked at that class profile, we saw that those students' skills and abilities were below. I can simply go up and add it to my plan on the upper right-hand side. When I add it, and then I can tell it where to add to at the bottom. I'm going to add this actually to a small group and then hit save. And when I go back to my lesson plan, I will now see that at the bottom of the day, I have added that small group instruction in order to support those children's development and learning. Okay. The system also then allows for, there are other reports that we can use to support families. There are development and learning reports, individual child reports. And so can you just simply show an individual child report very quickly? So we have an individual child report. Let's just choose Bella here. And then can you choose several checkpoint periods? Maybe if we have, we'll see if we have any information on Bella. Okay, so we only have 1 checkpoint in here, but this allows us to see children over time. So for like a community-based organization that actually has children from 6 weeks all the way up through pre-K, you would be able to see that child's growth and development over those entire 4 years, right? You would be able to see how their skills and abilities kind of grew, right? And so this is a beautiful way of really measuring growth over time. If a child is in a public school system where they are doing 3K, and then in the same system could be a completely different school going to pre-K, we would also see this growth over time. Okay. These reports, a lot of these reports can be like the development and learning report can be shared home with family members, which talks about exactly where a child's skills and abilities currently are, and then where would they be going next, right? And so we're just going to do this on one child at this particular time. We're going to generate our report. It tells us for Bella here that the child is currently beginning to be able to look at situation differently or delay gratification, which means that she's practicing the skill. Next, we want her to master it, right? And so mastery would be she would be able to look at a situation differently or delay gratification. So this is exactly where the child's skills are and where they're going next. This is a beautiful report to share home with families so that they understand, and then providing some additional supports in order to help the family. So when I am also in that teach screen, based off of that small group experience that I was doing. So Ryan, if you can specifically go to that small group experience that we added in that morning. So when I have it here, I can actually create the family. So if I go to share with families, can you go to share with families? If I have invited when I invite my family members to participate, I can share that guided learning experience home with that family member immediately, right? And it turns it into family-friendly language. So now we're supporting that child at home also. But also what we're able to do, and you can see here how it's family-friendly language and so forth. And you can do this in English or in Spanish. The other thing that we're able to do is that we're able to actually then also share the learning games. And so for each of our intentional teaching experiences, if you go to the share with families, is a learning game attached to it, right? The learning games, they come out of the Abecedarian Project. These are very family-friendly activities that families can do at home to support their child's growth and development, right? And so we always want to be connecting what is happening in the classroom to home. We want to be connecting what is happening at home with the classroom. Remember, we're working in partnership with families to really support their child, as they are embarking on this journey of gaining new skills and abilities. So the family tab, if we go to the family tab, and when we invite family members into the system, and we don't have any family members added here, but can you go to the access the resource library here? So when we go here, we can share at-home learning plans with families, which are specific to the studies that we would be doing. Okay, so it allows us to specifically say we're currently doing the ball study. What does that look like? We can view it. It goes home to family members. It supports them not only with the a little piece around the study itself, but with intentional teaching experiences, Mighty Minutes, and then micro learning opportunities for families. But I also have the opportunity to share development and learning activities. And these activities are easy to share because development and learning activities, I could say that even though the child's skills and abilities are, the child has been assigned to the blue color band, their skills and abilities are really at a 2 to 3 year old level. So if I go in here to that age group, and then if I went to, let's just say literacy, and then I hit submit, the system is going to generate development and learning activities that I could share home with family members that would support their child's development, right? So we're always supporting a child exactly where their skills are now, and then where they would be going next. So now you can start to see how the system connects. We start with observations of children, right? As we observe children, we're taking that information, we're connecting it to the objectives for development and learning. We're using that information to really guide planning. So how do we individualize for children? How do we think about those flexible small groups to support certain groups of children? How do we differentiate the instruction within small groups? And then how do we connect this all with families in order to empower families to be their child's first and forever teacher in the classroom? So I think, Ryan, is there anything else you would like to show? Are you ready for like a Q&A?
We can do some Q&A.
All right.
All right, I'm going to turn the Q&A on right now. So if you have any questions for Ryan or Donna, feel free to type them in the Q&A right now.
And as we're doing this, I really want to thank Amy and Alyssa, our ASL interpreters today. I know we tend to talk fast sometimes, so thank you.
We absolutely do appreciate it. And I know we often talk very quickly to make sure that we cover everything that we need, but we certainly appreciate you all.
All right, the questions are rolling in. So just kind of how we did it this morning was we just kind of went back and forth. If you guys, Donna and Ryan, open up that Q&A and you just scroll through and see anything you want to answer, just feel free. They move so quickly, so hard to pinpoint just a couple, but.
Oh, it certainly is.
So first thing, is there a link I can practice uploading the study? As soon as you receive your login information, you will be able to practice that. Will we continue using work sampling online or just Gold? You will use Gold. The units for study for pre-K, so there are different units. You will work with your administrator. We have a suggested sequence of studies to use, but you'll work with your school administrator to determine exactly which ones you will use. Oh, so they would like to see the report card section. If Ryan, if you can in the background pull up a report card and then we can share it. How do we find time for all of this? Jamie, that's a great question, right? So it's really about using your muscles. This really, as we start to do this, it's really about gathering 2 to 3 pieces of documentation per day. It really will not take us long. I normally suggest that start with 1 piece of documentation per day. You may include 3 children in that 1 piece of documentation, but follow the assessment process. As that becomes very comfortable, as you're building that muscle, then you might go to 2 pieces of documentation. Then you might go to 3 pieces of documentation. Remember, we have teaching teams, right? And in our teaching teams, we want everybody in the classroom really taking documentation. So for instance, years ago, I worked with a teacher in New York City. He had a goal of 3 pieces of documentation per day. His paraprofessional had a goal of 2 pieces of documentation per day, right? So that they on average got about 5 per day. Sometimes they didn't get that all 5. Some days they got more than 5, but it was more than enough documentation. It's really about the quality of the documentation and not the quantity of the documentation. And so let me know when you have the report cards.
Yep, it's ready. Are you guys able to see it okay?
Yeah. So we would use, so Caroline brought up a good thing that just is critique of the alphabet, that we do not do drill and kill. No, we're using intentional experiences. So just like the observation we saw, children might be playing with letters in the sand table. And as they're gathering those letters out of their name, the teacher is, can you find the letters of your name? Oh, you found the first letter of your name. Can you tell me the sound of that letter, right? So we want authentic observations. This is not about pulling children to a table and assessing them. It would be, are they applying the work in the classroom? So as far as adding students' names and so forth, we'll help you get there. I promise we're going to give you lots of support along the way to help you know how to add students' names. So Ryan, do you have the report card ready to go?
I do. Can you see it on my screen?
Oh, yes, I can. So go ahead. And so what the report card looks like is for Bella here, we can see that we have the checkpoint 3. This is all we have in here, but you will see it. So a checkpoint is kind of like a grading period here, right? And so for manages feelings here, for checkpoint 3, we could see that Bella was meeting the widely held expectation. She currently is beginning to be able to look at a situation differently or delay gratification. Next, she will be able to. So she's beginning to practice the skill. We're moving towards mastery, right? If you look at 1C, Bella is also meeting. She is currently demonstrates confidence in meeting her own needs. Next, we're going to help her start practicing towards that next indicator, which is to begin to take responsibility for her own well-being, right? So the report card tells you whether or not they are meeting, exceeding, or progressing towards that particular where they're the color band that they're assigned to. And where exactly their skills are and where they would be going next. When the teachers print this off, I believe there is an opportunity at the bottom of it that the teacher can put additional notes and so forth right here, so they can add comments and so forth, just like we would for a normal report card. I do want to say, though, my favorite thing to actually use with families instead of the report card is actually the family conference form. So Ryan, if you quickly can go to the family conference form, go to Bella, go to create. We would first put in the family member's name. So if you can just put in, okay. And then we're going to just go in language right now. That's the only area we have. It looks like some documentation. You might have to change the checkpoint period, Ryan, in order to see. I think that's.
Yep. No, I'm good.
Okay. All right. Perfect. And if you can just hit save and continue. And so the system brings up that Bella is beginning to be able to look at a situation differently. And then you will see to the right-hand side all of the documentation that I've gathered. So a teacher can actually click on this. And what it does is say, Bella is able to do this. This is the documentation that I took that shows this is the evidence that I collected that allowed me to know this. So that when we do that family conference form, then I'm able to see exactly where the child's skills are, but the evidence that I collected that allows that to happen. You can edit anything in here. And then when we go to next steps, it is specifically to those particular where along the progression where the child's skills and abilities were. So report card, but also the family conference form, which gives us great information. The due dates, Natalie, we're still working with the DOE to determine what those due dates will be. However, those are very visible to you. So if you are in your checkpoint tab, you will be able to, in your assess tab, you will see a section called checkpoint dates that will actually tell you when your checkpoint dates are due, okay? And so know that those are not in there yet, but we are working with the DOE to get those in there for the 23-24 school year. I'm not sure about the SSO to log in. Can you send that to Caitlin? What is the address that they need to send information to?
If you have questions, you can send them to nycsuccess@teachingstrategies.com. We will get back to you as soon as we can. I will say after today, everyone has tons of great questions. So the email inbox is flooded today. So if you send a question today, please just be patient with us as we get through the very full inbox. I will put that email address in the chat box though for you all.
Exactly. Shandani, I hope I'm saying your name correctly, wanted to know, what do we do if families don't have access to computers or phones? All of the activities in here can be printed off and shared with families. All of the reports can be printed off and shared with families. Share online planning with their grade colleagues. Not at this time, Karen. That is something that we are looking at to be able to share plans. But remember, everybody downloads the same plan. So if you are a 3K or a pre-K teacher, you're downloading your study guide, which is all the same. And then you need to individualize based off of your students. So what additional intentional teaching experiences or Mighty Minutes would I add? What are the interests of children in my classroom? So even though I'm doing the ball study, I may have a child who went to the train museum this week and then comes in is talking all about trains. So I would still put on my lesson plan that I'm adding books about trains in the train, trains and train tracks to my block area to support that child's interest, even though I'm doing the ball study. I think that's probably about all of the questions we can get to at this point in time. We will continue to go through the questions though and try to get those answered. We are trying to build out some FAQs so that we can get all of your questions answered. Also know that you will have leaders and coaches who are also receiving lots of support. So you will have supports at lots of different levels. Ryan, can you pull the PowerPoint back up, please, so that we can share the websites and so forth so that everybody knows where to go?
Yes, ma'am.
So we've made it so you have access to lots of different resources. So you can email at the New York City Success at Teaching Strategies that Caitlin was talking about. You can also visit the website teachingstrategies.com/New York City that will give you information. We also want you to be very aware of the TAP program, which is the Teacher Acceleration Program. If you have not signed up for that, we want to make sure that you get signed up for that. You would actually go into the information should be on the website for that, right? If you go to the Hub tab in your My Teaching Strategies platform, you will see how to sign up for that. It walks you through your resources again and how to utilize this. Also within your Develop tab, you have lots of professional development that is available to you that really supports you. The last thing, Ryan, I really do want to show this group before we sign out for today is, can you please go to Teaching Strategies. If we go to just the main page of Teaching Strategies, and we're going to click out of the box before we sign in here. And then I want you to go to product support. So if we go to product support up at the top, we will begin to see all of the different tiles for different supports. So if I go to gold, I will then see that on the left-hand side, there is all of the supports for teachers and getting started and so forth. So you might go in and you might download the Gold User Guide for Teachers, right? This gives you lots of information. If you're like me and you like to read things and you like to mark it up, you can print this off, gives you lots of great information. On the right-hand side was all of the information for administrators and supports there. So you'll see there's the Getting Started for Teachers, Classroom Management, documentation. You'll see there's information there on the documentation app here, your checkpoints, reports. So there's going to be lots of supports here for you. And I think that really ties it up today. I want to thank everybody for your time here today. We know that this was only an hour and a half, webinar. You probably have more questions now that we've been through this, and this is okay. So again, there will be lots of supports for you going forward, either through webinars, your coaches in supporting you, your leaders in your school supporting you. As we move forward, and of course, all of the online professional development that is available.
Thanks, Donna. And thanks, Ryan, just for sharing all of your expertise with us. Thank you to Alyssa and Amy, our awesome ASL interpreters, for making this content available for everyone. And we want to thank you guys for joining us. If you are coming to another session later this afternoon, it is a separate Zoom link. So just make sure you leave this meeting and hop into the next one in about 30 minutes. And we will probably have another YouTube live stream available. So if we do hit capacity, you will have that live stream option available. So thanks again for your time. We hope you guys have a great rest of your day. You're staying safe out there with the air quality, and we will see you guys really soon.